when you talk about your book of Strong Mind, there are so many, I know you're into Buddha and Zen, and there's so many different perspectives on what creates a strong mind. What are some of the basic foundations of what you feel equals strong mind?
Well, you are the one who's in control of it. I mean, think about this. In the history of humanity, every human being who's ever lived, you're the only person who has unrestricted, unfiltered access to your mind. That's it. You're the only one. So if your mind is a place of peace, keep doing what you're doing. But if your mind is filled with anxiety, anger, angst, sadness, you're the only one who can get inside there and change it. You're the only one. So to me, a strong mind is someone who can have a sense of internal control regardless of what's going on in the world around you.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Dude Therapist. We have Dr. Conte on to talk a lot about emotions and how to just pause, how to handle them in a smarter way. And as your recent book is, How to Have a Strong Mind Equals Strong Men. So I'm super excited to have you on. Can you give a little snippet of who you are before we dive into all the questions?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm a licensed professional counselor, level 5 anger management specialist, which doesn't mean a whole lot to people outside the world of anger management. I like that one because there are only 4 of us in the world that have it, and the other 3 are 30 years older than I am. So I feel proud of that one. But yeah, I have a PhD in counselor education and supervision that I've had for a little over 20 years now. I've been doing this work for 27 years. Gosh, time flies. I specialize in working with people convicted of violent crimes. So I spend a lot of time in maximum security prisons. I work with people who have committed those crimes, but I also work with officers on how to handle that. So I train officers. I created a theory back in 1998 that's now an evidence-based approach to communication. So I train corrections and officers, police officers, but I also go way outside the world of prison. I've been doing sports psychology since I started. And I work with some of the best athletes in the world. And then I also work with organizations and consult in various different organizations. So I get to do a whole bunch of different things. Passionate about my.
That's so fun. Like that's the beauty when people are like coming into practice and they're like, oh, okay, I'm going to be stuck in this one niche forever. And I'm like, no, you can constantly grow, evolve, and pivot into like just expanding. And it's not like, oh, I have to work with X for the rest of my life. It's like, no, you can work with anything.
Absolutely anything. I'm a writer, always loved writing. You can write. When I would pitch, I was a tenured professor at the University of Nevada. I left there back in 2012, but I did love the teaching part. It was awesome. But when I would recruit students, I would say, let me tell you what you can do as a professional counselor. I'm also a speaker. I've been a professional speaker for 25 years, and you can do anything you want to do, anything.
Yeah. I love that. It speaks right to my heart. I came across you on social media and just like right away fell in love with how you talk about things, how you come at things, and how you really present them in such a knowledgeable way. And you just have this vibe about you, just like reality. You're very realistic about things. One of the biggest things, like you said, you created this theory in the late 1990s of this yield theory, right? Can you talk about, because that's like to me the start of a lot of the basic foundational things that you talk about in your books. Can you kind of give like a 60-second pitch of like what yield theory really embraces, and then we'll go from there?
Yes. So let's see. One of the best ways to describe what a theory is to people who aren't familiar with the field or what we're talking about, in martial arts, there are different styles of martial arts. And those martial artists, they train to get really good at a particular approach. And then let's say in mixed martial arts, they get into a fight breaks out. They rely on the approach that helps guide them through any conflict. Mm-hmm. Now, in the world of counseling, we also have theories, and they ground us because we obviously have never had anyone else's life experiences. And so when we interact with people, it's really important to connect with them. So what yield theory is this. My quick definition is, it is a theory of communication that involves leading with humility and curiosity to meet people where they are, get around their defensiveness, and speak in ways that can be heard regardless of the intensity of the emotions present. So what's really cool is this. We're 2025. I can't believe how fast time goes. But when I started, we didn't have access to brain scans that we now have, that we could know this so clearly. But as sure as a bear running in the room would trigger our fight or flight response, that's instinctual. A bear walks in the room, amygdala sends a message to our adrenal glands, put cortisol, adrenaline to our body. We're either going to fight, freeze, or flee, fight, flight, or freeze response. Now, as sure as that bear does this is so cool about living in 2025 that we understand this. The same part of our brain goes off when someone challenges our ego. The same part. So I disagree with you, or I think differently, or you're wrong. Let me tell you why you're wrong. Or your loved one says, we need to talk. Whatever it is, we defend our ego as fiercely as we defend our bodies. So yield theory is a way to meet people where they are, get around that defensiveness, and speak in ways that can be heard. That's what yield theory is in a nutshell.
And, it's so interesting because if you look at any of like the relationship books, whether it's Gottman or Sue Johnson or anything like that, they have different words for it. But I feel like the yield theory, like that image and that word is something that I think is so powerful, of just that space of reaction to response, right? The difference between how like instantaneous, just going for it, or just that yield, right? That let me just check yellow side, whatever, or that triangle with the yield in it can give that difference of responding. How do you teach someone that when it's so easily our amygdala and our system can get so hijacked by emotions? How do you train people or help people understand that they actually have the power to pause and then gain that perspective?
Such a great question. Yield theory boils down to doing 3 core actions. At the end of the day, like I live in dangerous situations. So the work I've done, my whole career. So having a bunch of BS or fancy terms was not going to work. Like I had to have something genuine. Like if somebody's got a shank and somebody's going to stab somebody, you don't have time to be like, what's that doctor's fancy 75-point plan? What's on page 388?
That's why I love what you do, man. It's very to the point and you can take it right away and put it into action.
Literally, they can hang up after they're done listening to this. You can go out and use it. But it comes down to 3 actions. That's it. Listen, validate, and explore options. Those are the 3 core actions. And this is about 10 or 12 years ago, I was speaking at this mental health convention. There were about 500 people there. So a woman came up to me at the break and she was super condescending. Like it's always fun. Somebody's like super condescending, talking down to you, right? So she looked at me and she said, is that it? Is that your big theory? 3 things. And I said, yes, ma'am. But if you think about it, all Bruce Lee ever did was move, block, and hit. He did pretty well for himself. So if you want to reduce it to something, sure, let's do it. I don't care. Let's reduce it. Let's make it easy. At the end of the day, those are what we do. Listen, validate, explore options. But you asked a great question, which is how do we teach that? How do we get that time to, instead of reacting, to respond? So as much as I simplify things, in my whole life, I have been passionate about making complex subjects super easy for people. Like that is really what I care about doing. So yes, it is those 3 core actions, but the reality is that it also can go really, really deep because there are 7 fundamental components that drive the way we listen, validate, and explore options. Ultimately, so everyone listening right now, everyone out there, you all listen, validate, and explore options. You do it all the time. The difference is we're intentional about the way we do it. But now let's get to that part about how do we teach it. Well, the 7 fundamental components can take it. I've been influenced heavily by Carl Jung, the analytical psychologies all throughout my work, Buddhism, cognitive behavioral therapy. Like I specialized teaching theories for years, so I was really integrated different approaches. But the key is non-attachment. So non-attachment is the 7th fundamental component, but I'm going to bring it up first because the question you asked, how do I teach people? One of the things people have to learn to do is realize that you are not your thoughts. You are not your thoughts. So if you challenge me, like if I take my thoughts and I put them in this book and you challenge my thoughts and I'm holding on to it, I get mad. I say, these are my thoughts. How dare you?
Yeah.
But if I ask anybody, do you still have more to learn in this life? Everybody says, oh yeah, as long as I'm alive, I got more to learn. Okay, so let me take these same thoughts and set them down over here. Now, when you challenge those thoughts, you're not challenging the essence of who I am. You're challenging these thoughts. I'm not attached to my thoughts. I've been wrong and learned a ton. I'll learn my whole life. So by teaching non-attachment, I'm able to help people see that Feedback about your performance, feedback about what you do is not feedback about who you are. And once you learn that, it's freeing because feedback's a whole aspect of what yield theory is. We're literally trying to communicate effectively with others.
I wish I could talk to you for like 7 hours because this is literally what I do with people every day. So I'm a relationship specialist. I work with couples, I work with people in that realm. And when they get into conversations about logistics, about where we should move and what we should do with the kids, I just finished writing my first book, and in I put some, examples that are like 10 years worth of couples into one, fake person, fake couple, but it's like
Yeah.
couples in one kind of thing. You've written
Yeah.
books, it's like, it's not a real couple, but it is a real couple.
Yeah. It's
And
an amalgam. It's an amalgam, and it's incredibly helpful because it helps you with confidentiality.
yeah,
Because you get to pull out very real components that you're seeing.
yeah, it's
That's
so
awesome.
great. And so one of them is the public school versus private school, right? And the argument came down to, well, are you saying that because I went to public school, I'm less than because you want our kids to go to private school and you think that's better? No, I want my kid to have certain opportunities. That, like, I want my kid, not you suck because you went to public school, right? It's that personalizing. And I think it happens, and I know I struggle with this, and most people do, and especially in today's day and age with the political conversations and all these different, it's very attached, it's very like part and parcel. ACT has that thing of, what's it called, now that I'm thinking of, diffusion, cognitive diffusion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pulling away a thought and a value as you and kind of separating them. So it's so hard because we're so trained over the course of our lives that you have certain beliefs and certain values, and it becomes like part of your DNA. To separate that feels like you're losing yourself.
That's just it.
So how do you combat that? How do you combat that idea, that little thing that goes, no, this is me, and it's like, no, it's not. It's like, but you're telling me to like not be myself.
Yeah, that's so wonderful. So look, A, congratulations on your first book. That's great. That's just fantastic. You're going to help a lot of people with that. Okay, B, so how do we do this? Well, I'm a storyteller. I'm going to tell a story, and the way people hear this story will actually teach them about themselves. Okay, this is really cool. If you're listening right now, how you hear this story will teach you something about yourself. Okay, so there was a know-it-all professor. He goes to see this Zen master, and he says to the Zen master, well, what is all this Zen stuff? What is this stuff? And before the master could answer, he starts rattling off more questions. Well, what about this? What about that? What about this? And he just keeps going on. He's super pretentious. So he doesn't stop talking. The master starts to pour him some tea. And as he starts to pour him the tea fills up. Finally, the tea's overflowing. The professor's still talking until he goes, whoa, stop. The cup's overflowing. And the professor says, that cup is like your mind. As long as it's filled up, there's no room to put anything new in it. If you really want to learn, you have to empty your cup. So empty your cup. So this is a very well-known story, and I would guess most people have heard this story before. So when I say how this teaches you about yourself is this. So I use that as the foreground when we're doing yield theory trainings, because at the end of the day, we all need to challenge ourselves to empty our cup. I remember probably maybe 14, 15 years ago, I was going to speak somewhere, and I was going to go through, I'm a storyteller when as a speaker because I try to keep people engaged. And I sat down, I had a book of tales, and I came across this story, Empty Your Cup. It even said at the top of the page, Empty Your Cup. So I said, I know this story. I've written about this story. I've done videos on it. I published about it. I went to turn the page and it hit me. My cup was full. I thought I already knew it. Like, how many times have you reread something and learned it deeper? Watched the documentary, learned more. Yeah. It's not about ego saying, I know this. Ego loves to rush. Like, I know. It's not about that. It's about understanding on a profound level. And so I challenge people to empty your cup. Like, whatever you think you know, step back and let's look at it again with fresh eyes. In Zen, we call it Zen mind, beginner mind. But we're constantly trying to, instead of proving what we know, look to see what we can learn. So one way I challenge people about what they are, I say, okay, let's start with, let's do the old Eric Fromm. He had a wonderful book, To Have or To Be. And so you're not your jewelry, right? If I take your jewelry, are you less of a person? But I really love that jewelry. Okay, but are you less of a person? No.
Yeah.
Okay, you might be sad that you lost it, but you're not less of a person. Okay. Well, how about ideas? What if you find out you're wrong about something that you really like, but you just, oh my gosh, I'm black and white, I'm wrong. Does that make you less of a person? No. Okay. So now you start to go closer and closer to what are the ideas? So even if you deeply believe something, if you find out it's not true, can you let go and say, that doesn't make me less of a person? And the more you learn to not identify with that, and instead only identify with the core of who you are, the essence of who you are. That's how we train to get people to understand this. I mean, look, I literally specialize in anger. You know how people are angry when they have to come talk to me? They're furious. I had a center out in South Lake Tahoe, California. People committed a violent crime, went to prison or jail, and then were sentenced to 52 weeks of anger management. That they had to pay for out of pocket. So how mad do you think people were? None of it's personal. It doesn't matter if it's physically or targeted at me. It's not personal. Like you can't give people something that's not inside you. And so I really work on teaching people non-attachment. In fact, in the same way that something like dialectical behavior therapy is, if somebody's looking out and trying to get a quick understanding of theories, they say, well, that's essentially CBT, but with mindfulness. Wonderful. So I guess if you look at yield theory and you want to reduce it, you might say it's CBT with Eastern stuff, but it's really non-attachment because obviously we integrate mindfulness, but non-attachment is the key component that really helps people actually be practicing yield theory. So challenging that, listen, it's not easy. It's possible. That's what I try to tell them. It's possible.
I want to talk to the parents listening right now. If you love your partner but feel like after kids, everything got harder, it's not your fault. It's actually pretty normal. I wrote a book from I do to we do because couples don't get warned about the resentment, the invisible workload, the fights that escalate way too fast, and the disconnect that sneaks in. The book is part real life, part therapist brain with tools to fight better, reconnect deeper, and actually feel like a team again. Because parenting should feel like us versus the chaos, not me versus you. From I Do to We Do is available now. Order at ellyweinsteinlcsw.com. My heart is, I'm so pumped to talk to you because as a male therapist, as unicorns in the world of therapy, because there are not so many people who are out there doing what you're doing, right? And I hope to reach that level one day. I really want to let you know how much I admire your work. It is iconic.
Thank you.
I don't know if people know who you are, but they need to. But in the world of mental health, you are top tier people to look to for anger and yield theory and non-attachment.
I honestly thank you very much. I've struggled like most people my whole life to accept compliments. And I have, over the last year or so, I've been doing a lot of work to recognize in myself that it really is okay to accept a compliment. So I appreciate that.
It's more about me giving it than you liking it, by the way.
Yeah, but for me,
I have the ability to give it to you. That's wonderful. Yeah. And also, Betho, it's very rare to come across someone of your stature who's a male in the world of therapy. So it really is an honor to sit with you and talk with you. And this idea of anger, I know I connect to. I have ADHD. I'm very impulsive, so I'm quick to anger, quick to regulation. I can have an argument with my wife and then 3 seconds later be totally fine. And she's like, what's wrong with you? I'm still brewing. I need a few hours, right? So I'm like that quick and then a drop. I also, with love, I'm very aggressive with my love in a good way. I will just be totally into you, not drop away, but my emotions are very big. So your work is something that I very connect to. And we'll get to the anger in a second. I want to just focus on the validation piece. There's something that I've been saying for maybe 8 years that I've realized you say and have been saying for longer. And it really is this idea of the simplicity of validation. And I want to hear your thoughts on it because I want to make sure I'm saying it right. And then I want to take your expertise, and knowledge with me forever. Is the idea that validation is I see you have something that bothers you and that matters. And I think people struggle with that. Because they think that validation means that I have to agree with you. And I work with people, I'm not joking with you, every day. No, I'm not going to give in on this. They're not right. I'm not going to tell them that. And I go, dude, it's usually with the men, by the way. It's usually with the men in the couple, heterosexual couple. I go, dude, It's not that you agree, it's that you see them. Can you
That's
talk
it.
about how to express validation in a less like therapy way that isn't robotic, but someone can actually implement? Because to me, a lot of times people think that we have to validate, we can't validate the person until we agree with it and we're on board.
Yeah, that's just, and
And
you
that's
hit the
something
nail
you've been
on the
talking
head.
about for 15, 20 years.
27 years. That
I
was
know.
the core of yield theory. So my core of yield theory was I imagined, what if I lived every day as someone else? So not just walk a metaphorical mile in their shoes, which is beautiful and wonderful. But what
Yeah.
if I had their cognitive functioning, their affective range, their life experiences? How can I possibly say I would have done something differently? My ego will kick in and be like, well, I had it tough and I didn't do that. No, that's from my intellect. If you really put yourself behind somebody's eyes, first of all, you can't, it's a non sequitur argument. So it's not like it's logical. I can't do it. But the point is that if I do this imaginary exercise where I put myself behind someone's eyes, I immediately wipe away judgment. And then the next thing is this. So I'm behind their eyes. I'm trying to see what they see. You said it perfectly. Validation isn't agreeing with someone. You're not condoning what they're saying. I can look at somebody who just killed a cellmate standing there with a knife, and I can validate that he's really angry without saying, okay, so don't even worry about it. Everything's cool. That's fine. Don't even worry about it. Yeah. No, I can acknowledge we call it in yield theory, we call it the box. They call it the Conte box. I just call it a box. But you put yourself on a different side of the box. So let's imagine this. Two people on different sides of the box. We can only ever see 1 to 2 sides of the box in a given moment. So if I want to see what's on your side of the box, I would have to get up and go around to see it. But let's take this a little further. Let's imagine that the box has screens on every side, and the screens show random images. So my ego will want to say, well, I've been to your side. I know what your side looks like. But there's no way I could know what's on your side when I'm on this side unless I ask. That's it. And I have to have the humility to recognize I don't know what you're seeing, and the curiosity to want to know what you're seeing. And then when you tell me what you're seeing, I'm acknowledging that's what you're seeing. That's validation. I'm acknowledging what you're seeing, your perspective. And so we have a saying in yield theory where we say, drain the limbic system. And here's what I mean by this. If you're trying to if your ego wants to be right, it'll say, okay, I read Dr. Conte's 3 core actions: listen, validate, explore options. So let's say you're working with a client and he comes to you and he says, okay, I read that book and I told my wife, yeah, you're upset. And I helped her see what she could do differently. It's not about just telling her she's upset. It's about imagine you're behind her eyes. And here's what happens with draining the limbic system. A lot of times people validate until they get to say, or their ego gets to say, I did validate. But I say, imagine that your limbic system, your center of your emotions, is filled up with, let's say it's filled up with water. This is just a metaphor. If somebody's tuning in, I'm not saying the brain has water in it. But let's say the emotional system has a bunch of water. So now I turn on a spigot. As soon as I turn it on, I turn it off. I may have let a couple drops out, but all the stuff is still in there. So that's what happens when you validate someone just to prove yourself right. I did validate them. But when you drain the limbic system, we always say, don't just validate until you think you validated. Validate until the other person feels validated. And that is something everyone knows. Instinctually, we know. You might get it like this. When I'm teaching, and I always ask people, so how do you know? I don't care what the crowd is. I work with people. I was doing a training recently with people in construction. Those guys knew it right away. You see a sigh of relief. Yes. You go, somebody exhales, or you get me, or you got it. And that moment, that's when they validate them until that point. Now you can start to explore options. But really, validation is acknowledging the other person's side of the box. And I will tell you that the biggest challenge is when we do trainings, I see it every time. People listen and then they hurry up and try to solve it. So just do this. Just do this. And the problem is when you say just do this. So let's say I have an emotional issue, and you're helping me. While I'm in the emotional center of my brain. I come to you, you're in the frontal cortex, you're in a higher level thinking. So I tell you my problem, and you're not emotionally involved, so you have a solution really quickly. You go, just do this. but I'm in my emotional part, so I can't get there. I don't even know. I can't get there because I have all these emotions clouding me. But if you could validate me and help me drain my limbic system, let me get there. Yes, now you see what I'm talking about. Then you start to explore options. Now I'm with you. And the problem is a lot of people just do this. And I'm not big on PowerPoints, but on my one PowerPoint slide, when I talk about validation, I have a guy standing next to somebody at the base of a giant mountain. And he says, just climb the mountain. Because technically that's what you just climb the mountain, but it might be literally that, but it's hard. So validation it's the key. It's the key.
Can I just push back on one thing? Just
Sure.
to ask a question to understand deeper is I've had people that I've worked with who say, no matter what I say, it's never enough. Like, even though I'm validating that partner who's like, nope, it's not perfect. It's not right. It has to be better. And like that perfect language or the robotic response, like the formula, if you said this plus this was this, then I would have felt better. You're like, but I am trying to validate you and doing all the things of the box and, what the doc said and all the things. How do you help the other person accept being seen?
So great question. So the couple things happen. In yield theory, we talk about the game film approach. And someone might say, I did do all of that stuff. The problem is it's how the other person sees that. So let's say you've been married for how long?
10 years.
10 years. So your wife sees things about you that you have unconscious things about your face that she knows because she's watched your face for 10 years. You might say, no, I was genuine, but you might have had a microscopic look that reminded her of an argument you had 8 years ago where you didn't mean what you said to somebody. So the first thing is to be less attached to trying to determine how the other person is experiencing you, because maybe they are seeing something there. Maybe, I don't know. But you're also asking about a very specific personality trait, which definitely occurs where people are what I would call a bottomless cup. So you could fill it up all day long. There's never going to be enough. So when that happens, I would call that out. It seems like there's nothing that I would be able to do that could ever satisfy you. And that's a challenge because I'm giving you my best, but I feel my perspective is whatever I'm giving you seems to fall short. So that's how I would coach somebody to kind of work through and challenge that, because that's a fact. And listen, I call it crisis prone people. DSM might say borderline personality disorder, but there are some people, the way I explain it is this, and this could probably help a lot of people, but imagine on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 is a high crisis, and 1 is a completely calm human brain. 10 is a brain in high crisis. So let's say a fire breaks out. You got people with level 1, everybody in the room has a level 1 brain. They're all calm brain. Fire breaks out, 6, 7, 8. Maybe it's a really scary fire, 9, maybe even a 10, but you get out of the room, you get out of the building, and you're safe. So now about a half an hour goes by and that 10 starts to come back down to a 1. Now imagine this. For some people, they wake up every day and their brain is at a 4 or 5. It's neurologically vibrating at a 4 or 5. So they feel like they're in crisis. So they start to create crises around them to make sense out of it. One of the things that distinguishes, by the way, yield theory from something like cognitive behavioral therapy is this. In CBT, they say your thoughts determine your emotions. In yield theory, we say your thoughts impact your emotions, but your mind always wants to match your body. So watch this. You and I down 3 energy drinks really quickly right now. Here's what's going to happen. Heart's going to start racing. Da, 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 da. Our body might start physically shaking. We're going to mimic anxiety. And when our body mimics anxiety, our mind will race to create a story to make sense out of it. So typically high functioning people might say something like, oh, I forgot to send that email, or did I pay that bill, or whatever. We're going to create a story. So in yield theory, we teach people how to pay attention to that story and instead step out of yourself. That's why mindfulness is one of the components. Become mindful, step outside of yourself and say, hold on a second. This guy drank a bunch of caffeine and his heart's racing and he's feeling anxious, but there's no story. And essentially what happens is you don't add to it. So is this a visual podcast? People could see this as well, correct? So let's say this fist represents my body being flooded with a bunch of caffeine, and I start to feel anxious. Now my body's feeling anxious. So then my mind races in and goes, oh no, I'm dying, which then sends more cortisol and adrenaline, which more thoughts, and it builds up. And what happens is it builds up and up. In short, that's basically what a panic attack is. So what we teach people to do is when this initial thing happens, to step outside yourself, observe it, but don't add to the story. And how do we do that? In yield theory, we say we use accurate language. So I might say, when this starts to happen, this feels really uncomfortable. I don't like how I feel in this moment, but it's not the end of the world. Every emotion has a beginning, middle, and end. Now, listeners might go, nobody talks to themselves like that. I do. And people I train do, because it's called accurate language. We learn how to be accurate in our language. Extreme words produce extreme emotions. You never listen to me. Well, you're going to feel that high crisis stuff. This always happens. Well, that's going to be crisis. But if you go, you know what, I attempted to say something to you earlier and you didn't quite hear me the way I wanted you to. Well, now that's accurate. And this circles back to your initial thing when you first started talking about your book and how you had people, the couple that you're talking about. The skill that I would pinpoint, that my ears immediately go to, that you're teaching people, that I think is the number one thing we can teach people, is discernment. Discernment, the ability to say, if I'm mad that you didn't do the dishes, only be mad that you didn't do the dishes. I'm not saying you're a bad person. I'm not saying you did anything else. I'm literally only talking about the dishes. So you might use this technique in your counseling if you want, but this is a technique I do with people. And I say, go home and you get to fight all week. Have fun fighting. Here's the only caveat I have for you. I want you to only fight about what you're fighting about. So if it's about the dishes, we're not going to throw in 3 years ago you did this, or 5 months if it's about the dishes, it's only about the dishes. And you will watch couples come back to you the next week and be like, we couldn't do it. We jumped. You had to pull something else in. You had to pull this in. And it's because the ego needs to be right. So I can't, if you're mad at me because I didn't do the dishes, and I start explaining to you, well, I've had tough life and I did this. And what about last year when I did this for you? No, you're talking about the dishes. That's it. And so the ability to discern things, it takes practice. It is a skill that I believe is essential to teach our young people. It's a skill that just doesn't take place because you see so many people get so attached to their ego. They need to be right. They need to win the argument. I'm nobody to argue with, because you want to argue with me, I'll just say, you're right. You can have whatever you want. Like, I don't care. You get to be right. You saying you're right doesn't make anything different. So like, if it makes people feel better, go ahead. You're right. I'm wrong. That's cool. Like,
so that brings me to the next topic of accountability and shame, where you talk about that a lot when it comes to how to take ownership of the harm that you've caused.
Yes.
Without it being shameful, but just owning up to it. How do you help specifically men? Because your work, and I don't even know if we're going to time to even talk about this like whole part of your. I can maybe push off a little bit because I need to get every piece that I can from you. I don't know, like you work in the world of prison systems, and you know that epitome of what people envision as violence, dangerous, and men. Right, the toxic masculinity that people are afraid of, you know, whatever, all the bad boogeyman that everyone envisions of human society, right? Yeah. Even though they're just as vulnerable, and even though they're just as human as everyone else. I worked with mandated clients in a clinic back in the day with Rikers Island and stuff like that back in New York. I've seen it. I've worked in that world also, not as long and not as intense, and not in the prison system, but sometimes accountability is the hardest part because we feel so ashamed to own up to something. How do we help someone own up without that shame stopping them from saying, yep, it was me?
So my mindset is this: going into it, I'm really well aware that when people live in shame, they act out of shame. So it's important for listeners to understand the difference between guilt and shame. So guilt is feeling bad about something that you've done. That's actually really healthy. If you hurt somebody and you feel bad, make amends, make it right. Cool. Guilt is feeling bad about what you've done. Shame is feeling bad about who you are. And my research for more than 25 years has shown me that when people live in shame, they act out of shame. If I think I'm a no good piece of nothing, then why not hurt you? Why not hurt myself? So for me, in fact, actually with yield theory, my 7 fundamental components, I actually, it was as recent as something like 2018 or 2019 that I changed the one from being called elimination of shame to compassion. I want everything to be like an act of what we're doing, not a negative. So I changed it, but it essentially was there all along because I would really, I work with people convicted of violent crimes. They do the worst things in the world. But here's what I've learned. If you live in shame, you're going to go out and hurt other people. So like if you work with people who've done these horrific crimes against children, it makes my stomach sick. It makes my stomach sick to this day. I can hear myself if I even begin to talk about it. I can hear my energy go up because it's a horrific thing. But I work with people and give them my best because if you just sit back and let your ego shame them, you're a piece of crap, you're garbage, then your ego feels good, but they feel worse. And then guess what? They go out and hurt some other child and you're just feeding into it. So I'm not going to feed into that. I've done this work long enough to watch people get shamed in prison, get out, and just go hurt someone else. I've also watched people go in, learn to shine a light on it, not have it be shame, feel guilty about hurting somebody, but learn from it and move forward. And again, the way to do this, we'll circle all the way back to the beginning, non-attachment. So I am not my actions. I am responsible for my actions. I am responsible for every single thing I say and do. And I will listen to people who have no experience in the prison system say things like, well, solitary confinement is cruel and unusual punishment. And if you've never been involved in the prison system, you can go ahead and say that from a distance. I've worked with people who have done horrific things to everyone you've ever sold them with. So who are you selling them with next to let them torture and do horrific things to next? So solitary confinement is absolutely necessary. Some people, I can give you my best and I'll treat you humanely and compassionately, but there are boundaries. And some people are ready, willing, and able to hurt others, and they are intending to hurt others. And so consequences are essential. Like one of the reasons why yield theory is so effective is very clear boundaries. I'm not going to give in. Like when guys were like, and this will all tie into the shame thing, but like if they got 3 unexcused absences, I'm going to take it back to what I described earlier. 52 weeks of anger management. You get 3 unexcused absences. On the 4th, you're going back to prison or jail. If you're 1 minute late to my group, that's an unexcused absence. Oh, that's harsh on them, doc. 1 minute late. Well, if I let in so-and-so with 1 minute late, next week he's coming in 2 minutes late. Next week he's going 3 minutes late, and it's going to be, so it's very clear boundaries. But here's why it's successful. Because you're not a bad person if you're late. But if you're late, there's a consequence. And I don't think you're a bad person. I think you broke this boundary and there's a consequence. And I'm not giving in on that consequence because I'm not going to get overrun because you chose to not get here on time. So being clear about consequences. Now we tie all this in. When I say to somebody, when you've done something hurtful to someone else, depending on how hurtful, and again, I see the worst in humanity, so I can see really, my mind goes super dark, super fast. That's not the average listener. So to the average listener, if you hurt someone, feeling guilty that you hurt them, instead of rushing to defend yourself and prove yourself right. Well, I didn't mean to. Well, what about what they did? No, let's use discernment. Let's be accurate. You hurt your partner. Apologize. Own that. Put yourself behind their eyes. If that person did it to you, it would hurt you. And it's okay to sit with the difficult emotions. This is the key. This is the key right here. So if somebody does something hurt, if I say something hurtful to my wife and she's hurting, I don't get to say, well, just don't, I didn't mean to, so just don't be upset about it. I don't get to determine how she feels that hurt. If you're hurt, you're hurt. Like okay. If you're mad, you're mad. I give you the space to be mad. Now, of course, you have an entire spectrum of listeners out there right now. So some people hear that the way it's intended. Other people will hear it and go, see, you should always be upset or guilty for this. You know what I mean? So it's just, there's so many variables to what people are thinking right now in their minds. Again, I've done this for decades, so I know there are lists. I had a call-in radio show, And, you'd have callers call in and have wildly different stories from the same experience. But if you're only listening to this podcast or any podcast to hear what you want to hear to validate your ego, that your ego is right and your partner is wrong, then I'm going to go ahead and say you're not on the right path.
I have a little more time, and I can't wait to ask you these last few questions about the idea of a strong mind, strong man. And we're going to talk about cooling off and, your 5 keys to cooling off. But when you talk about your book of Strong Mind, there are so many, I know you're into Buddha and Zen, and there's so many different perspectives on what creates a strong mind. What are some of the basic foundations of what you feel equals strong mind?
Well, you are the one who's in control of it. I mean, think about this. In the history of humanity, every human being who's ever lived, you're the only person who has unrestricted, unfiltered access to your mind. That's it. You're the only one. So if your mind is a place of peace, keep doing what you're doing. But if your mind is filled with anxiety, anger, angst, sadness, you're the only one who can get inside there and change it. You're the only one. So to me, a strong mind is someone who can have a sense of internal control regardless of what's going on in the world around you. That to me is strength. So I probably, as long as I've gone on a podcast without talking about this actual essential part of yield theory, but I say that the world boils down to 2 kinds of worlds. There is the cartoon world and the real world. And this is a game changer. This is like life-changing information. The cartoon world is our world of shoulds. People should think, feel, believe, and behave the way I say they should. And then there's the real world, how people actually think, feel, believe, and behave. So someone cuts you off in traffic. He shouldn't have done that. That's cartoon world. The real world is, he did cut me off. Somebody says something in a relationship. You shouldn't have said that to me. Real world. They did say that to you. So I've spent decades helping people align their expectations with reality. The more prepared I am for reality, the better chance I can handle it. And this is probably one of the biggest keys to peace, if you can pay attention to your cartoon world. And here's the problem. The cartoon world is logical. It might be logical, but it's not reality. Reality is what's actually happening. So again, I guess with the work I do, with the violence I deal with, I don't have time to spend time in a cartoon world. You shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have said that. I can only deal with, you did do that. You did. So what can I do from this moment forward? And I think what happens is people who are mentally weak, they spend a lot of time in their cartoon world. And look, everyone has it. I have a cartoon world. I came up with the concept. I have a cartoon world. I didn't create the concept of shoulds. Karen Horney in the 90s called it the tyranny of the should. And then later in the 1950s, Albert Ellis said, don't should all over yourself. But I call the world of should, what I termed it as is the cartoon world. And I call it that because it's fictitious. It's not real. It's not real. Doesn't matter how logical you are. So and I don't want to say every time you say the word should, because I have, and I put this in Strong Mind, Strong Man, value-based shoulds, like I should go to work on time. Great. That makes sense. The cartoon world shoulds are demands on others, and they're demands on reality. Like, you shouldn't have done that. This shouldn't have happened. That's a cartoon world should. And as long as you do that, you're going to be struggling. And the crazy thing is, one day you'll realize it's not the world. The world's not letting you down. The world is what it is. It's you've aligned your expectations with how you think it should be. Now, if you align your expectations with how things are, you're going to be way better at handling it when it happens.
100%. I love that. I use that so often with myself, with other people, just to be able to just have that grip on themselves a little bit better. And I know we all succumb to that struggle. And,
Of course, just to be clear, I have a cartoon world. The difference is I have been spending decades practicing catching it. So what happens is I can just catch mine really quickly. I can feel, you shouldn't have said that. And in my mind, incredibly rapidly, because I practiced it for so long, I go, that's a cartoon world thought. This person did say it. Okay. So then I'm very accurate. So you said something that I would have chosen for you not to say. Okay. Is that really the end of the world? Because I've certainly said stuff people would have chosen for me not to say that I've chosen not to say. So at the end of the day, we have a tendency to minimize the harm we cause others and amplify the harm they cause us. But when you become mentally strong, you go, you know what? People only ever see our actions, not our intentions. So we judge others by their actions, but we judge ourselves by our intentions.
Yeah, and I think in today's day and world, I think this concept is so important because people take that idea that the world sucks, so I am, or the world's terrible, so I am, or this external thing is, so I will be. And it's not, I have to deal with it. That's like the radical acceptance piece, right? This happened, I feel, now what? And that piece is very hard for a lot of people nowadays to deal with. And something I wanted to ask you is, on a podcast you did about strong mind and strong armor. And you talk about the difference between, some people feel that a strong mind is you have to keep it in and hide it and protect and suppress, basically, to be a productive male in society, that you have to really just keep it nice and internal. How do you help people grapple with that idea that a strong mind is sometimes expression, is sometimes processing, is most time processing, and it doesn't mean that you have to have a strong armor to be a strong mind?
I'm not attached that I could be wrong, and maybe I said that, but I have no recall of talking about that, of strong armor. I have no memory that that would have been me. It's possible it was me, but I would say that, because I'm trying to think how I would even phrase that in my head. I think that being strong is being vulnerable at times, to be vulnerable, to be able to say, to communicate to your loved one. Look, for example, let's say that I'm hungry and I snap at my wife. I say something quick toward her because I'm starving. I own my actions, and I would like to say, you know what? I was really hungry and that led me to say that, but me saying that's not an excuse, but that is what happened. Being vulnerable to say I was struggling and this is what led to this. There's not an excuse. I own it. But I think that vulnerability is so important. I think we do think the old school mentality with men was like, I don't say anything and that makes me tough. That's not reality. Sometimes, so the way I teach young men is this: if somebody pushes you and you have a chance to punch them back, what is easier, to punch them back or to swallow your pride and walk away? And everybody's like, well, it's obviously easier to punch them in the face. Like, so what? You get in a fight. I don't know what today's kids are, but I grew up, I'm Generation X. We got in fights all the time. So you get in a fight, something's going to happen. It's not the end of the world. But like, it's easier to get in a fight than it is to swallow your pride and walk away. So then what's being tough? Tough is doing the hard thing. So to be truly tough, it's okay to be vulnerable times. It's not the easy thing to do. But if you really want to be mentally tough, sometimes it's the challenging thing. And for many people, that might be saying, I'm sorry. That might be saying, look, I was scared. I was scared to lose you. And that made me say these really controlling things because I was afraid to lose you. I was afraid of being wrong because I thought if I was wrong in front of you, you would think less than me. So I started to act like a jerk at this place. Because I wanted to put this person down because I thought if you thought bad things of them, you would like me. That's insecurity. And then talking about that insecurity, that's enormous. That's enormous. I mean, strong mind is controlling yourself. A weak mind tries to control others, including your partner. I want to control how you see everyone else around me. That's trying to control someone else. Again, strong mind is to control the mind within. It's not easy. It is possible. I worked my whole life to make stuff super simple to understand, but just because it's easy to understand doesn't mean it's easy to do. Because the truth is, if you and I said right now, somebody said, well, how can I get stronger? Do push-ups. Do 500 push-ups every day. You'll get stronger. That is all that needs to happen, but it's not easy to do.
Yeah.
So same thing with mental strength training. It's not difficult. It's not complex. Have accurate language. It's hard to do. The more you practice it, the better you get at it.
Yeah, I have two more questions, and I know exactly where I got that thing from. I can tell you after when I
Okay.
start recording. When it comes to the idea of parents today, of young men, right? There's a big conversation with books like yours of Boys to Men, right? All these kind of conversations about how to raise successful, feeling, emotionally strong, powerful men. Not in the way of CEOs, but as a person, as an individual. What would be some foundational things that you can speak to parents about how to raise the foundation of a young man in their life?
I think having honor is one of the most important things you could do. Have honor in who you are and what you do. So in Buddhism, we call it right effort. Like, I'm going to put effort into every single thing I do. I mean, Again, it's a part of the path that I practice. But if you really look at the eightfold path, that lays it out for you. Right speech, right action, like really be mindful of how are you speaking to people? What are you doing? Are you mindful of how you're coming across others? To me, the eightfold path really lays it out. But the other thing that I would say is train in accurate language. Teach them about the cartoon world, real world. Train in accurate language. This new book, I really wrote it for the hands-on, strong mind, strong man. I really put in there what I think people need to practice to work, to gain mental freedom. Like if you read that book and do those exercises, you'll gain mental freedom. And that is something no one can take away from you ever. Never. That's what I would want young men to practice. And that's the kind of world that I want for my daughter to live in. I want people to have honor.
Last question, because I think it's such an interesting world that you've been in, right? Working in, prison system and stuff like that. What are some things that you have seen? Maybe one story or one lesson that you can take from the prison yard to the living room, right? From that world to someone's home life that you think would be a takeaway lesson that we can really kind of internalize for our lives.
Yeah, well, the thing of it is it does go across to all of us. I'll give you a condensed version of the story, but I one day went on to death row and told the officer to open the doors. So like they literally went in and he laughed. He thought, I was like, no, open the doors. They radio up to the bubble. They laughed. Then they called, figure out who I was, that I had the ability to do it. So he said, you really want me to open the doors? So I opened the doors on death row, let all the guys come out. Well, the first time I did that, only 4 guys came out. Because if you open the doors on death row and people don't know that it's going to be open, they don't come out. It's tough as everybody talks behind doors. But the next unit I went to, they knew what I was talking about, so they all came out. So I'm on death row talking to about 21 incarcerated individuals. And one of the things I said to them was this: if I handed you a bucket, what would you put in that bucket? And the first incarcerated man on death row said, food. I said, cool, you'd have food in your bucket. The next guy said water. I said, cool, you have water in your bucket. The third guy, big guy on death row, he looked at me, stone cold, and said, my cellie's head, my cellmate's head. So I didn't want to blink. So I was like, okay, cool. So you'll have your cellmate's head in your bucket. Here's my point. Whatever you put in your bucket will be in your bucket. And that makes a lot of sense, right? But the same is true with your mind. Whatever you put in your mind, if you put violent music, violent movies, violent video games in your mind, you're going to have violence in your mind. If you want peace, you got to put peace in your mind. People tell me they listen to politics all day and politics anger them. Why would you do that to yourself? It seems absurd. It seems absurd to fill your mind with things you don't want in your mind. Like, it just makes no sense. It'd be like sitting down at a restaurant and ordering everything you don't want. Like, why would you do that? So anyway, that day, that is 100% true story from death row. And we laughed because when I was walking out of there with the deputy that day, I said, I don't know what's more concerning, which is we had a better understanding of why that man was on death row, or the fact that on death row, you're single celled. So they don't have cellie. So there was no cellmate. So we were like, whose head was he putting in there? That's a little prison humor. Probably you can edit that out or whatever.
No,
it's fine.
Good. I worked in a psych unit. We had our own humor.
It's just, but it was 100% true story. But it was interesting because everybody on that unit that day, including that big guy, they all agreed. They said, you're 100% right. It is true. If you're filling your bucket. So I ask every listener out there, what are you putting in your bucket? Like, what are you putting? And I've done that technique with athletes, and it's cool. You asked for a prison one, so I told that one. But I get the same thing across the board. Like, I hand you a bucket. What are you putting in it? Like, and people will be like, well, what kind of, no, I give you a bucket. You're putting your keys in it. Whatever you put in it or is in it. And the same is true with your mind. If you want peace, fill your mind with peace.
Okay, I got that. I was going to ask you if you could tell one thing to everyone, but I think that is the perfect way to wrap up. Where can people find what you do? Can you tell what books are coming out? What are some of the things that people can reach out and find that you are up to in the world of helping and the world of mental health?
Yeah, I would really love if people could get that book, Strong Mind, Strong Man. I also have a book, I have 12 books, but Walking Through Anger. Walking Through Anger is available on Audible too. So like it's an audio book, you can get that. We're getting Strong Mind, Strong Man will eventually be too. But I have a YouTube channel and all those, TikTok and stuff like that. But my YouTube channel, we're going to put a lot more effort into, or not a lot more consistency to coming up. So I'd love for people to check it out. It's just Dr. Christian Conte on YouTube. That would be awesome.
Follow now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and finally, see me on YouTube at The Dude Therapist.